The Leveson Inquiry Part 2 won't go ahead, the new Culture Secretary has suggested. We're going to read into this exclusive from iNews, you guys. Let's go. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. This is Reganelite here with an exclusive from iNews with the headline that Leveson Inquiry Part 2 won't go ahead, the new Culture Secretary has suggested. Labour has previously backed going ahead with the second stage of the Leveson Inquiry in 2018 under Jeremy Corbyn. Guys, while you're here, make sure you hit the like button and share this across social media so others are notified of this video. Now, let's be very clear here. It does not say that they're not going ahead, that they're not going to not go ahead with it. It does say the word, the very important, the key word of what is put there is suggest, which is very, very worrying indeed, guys. So why is the Leveson Inquiry so important to implement? It is so important to hold media, especially journalists, media to account, especially tabloids, newspapers and broadcasters. A lot of some of those in there that you see on that rack in front of you there, a lot of them misconscribe, mislead, and don't give a fair account and accuracy of some of the stories that they show, especially when it comes to politics. They paint the picture that they want to paint you, not so much the picture that you are supposed to be showed. And that's both from rights and on the so-called right, if you want to call it like that. Even on the so-called left, such as the Daily Mail, the Daily Mail, which is obviously known as a right-wing newspaper, and the Daily Mirror, obviously a left-wing newspaper. Some papers you can call centre-left or centre-right, i.e. whatever your preference is. Some people are obviously, those of the Telegraph will say that centre-right, or some even further right, they say the Telegraph. The Guardian's considered a centre-leftish paper, for example, but it's kind of whatever your suggestion is. Now, I do think the Leveson Inquiry does need to be implemented. We do need, and I've said this before in the past on this channel about the need for media reform. It's really, really important that when the media misconscribes or misleads or paints a picture that is inaccurate, it needs to be held to account for that. And one of the many things that they were doing is very much misleading the British public, especially during the time of Brexit. We had, and also during the immigration, during when under Suella Braverman, under the Conservatives with some of the immigration, there was that time where the judges were considered the enemies of the people because they were following the laws by the Daily Mail, which was an outrageous and hideous attack on our judicial system. And there's no accountability there for that. The papers are free to kind of go and do whatever they please. And we can't have completely uncontrolled media. Now, some people might say, well, you're affecting free speech. Well, there's free speech and then there's misinformation or misleading. And the problem is that you need to have restrictions. You've got to have restrictions, because if you don't have restrictions, then it can lead to misinformation, misconscribed, misinformed, misinformation. They can go down that way if there's not some kind of accountability. Now, yes, of course, a lot of people nowadays, not all looking at newspapers on their tellies, or some even going to their media broadcasters. Some now look online for their sources of information. Some people use TikTok. Some people use Twitter for their information. Other people just use social media instead of newspapers. But there is still a good chunk of the British public who still use the newspapers. There's some who still look at broadcasters like BBC, GB News, Sky News. And it's really important that the safeguards are there to protect the people. The BBC has become extremely biased towards the Conservatives, and that's a fundamental fact. And if you want any proof of that, you can just tell by the guests that they've had on Question Time over the past several years. That's proven itself. The amount of times that Laura Queensberg has sucked up to the Conservatives on that panel as well. The amount of times that Fiona Bruce has been quite defensive, tried to protect, shall we say, in a way, the Conservative brand as well, and it's not a level and even playing field, and the playing field needs to change. If we don't change the level playing field, nothing is going to get better in this country. Nothing will ever get better. Accountability needs to be done. It's really, really important, you guys. So let's read into this. So the Culture Secretary Lisa Nandy has hinted that the second part of the Leveson Inquiry, known as Leveson 2, is unlikely to proceed. She also appeared to criticise the previous Conservative government for its comments on the impartiality of the BBC, as she suggested she remains open to further reform of the broadcaster. Asked about the status of Leveson 2, which was put on hold by the Tories in 2018, Mr. Andy said, well, it's not something we're committed into in the manifesto. Yes, this was not stated. It is true it was not stated in the manifesto, but this is something that people would like to see. I personally would like to see some kind of media reform. And yes, they did not put that in their manifesto, but mind you, I've got to be honest, none of the political parties put it in their manifesto because it's not considered a priority. However, I do think that a change of our electoral system, such as proportional representation and media reform, are two crucial, fundamental things that need to change for the benefit of the British public. But just because it's not something put in their manifesto doesn't mean it's not something they can't have down the road as well. Like, we know there's a high demand for proportional representation, but that wasn't put in their manifesto as well. In an interview with the House magazine, shared exclusively with the Eye, the Culture Secretary emphasises the need for a robust regulation system that maintains trust in the media, she said. We need a proper regulatory system that supports the public to be able to have trust in what is reported. I'm very opposed to the idea that politicians should be telling the media and the press what they can and can't say. The relationship between politicians and the media is always complicated. It can be very uncomfortable at times, but that's important to democracy. Now, I want to make it very clear. Nobody is saying that we need. Nobody is saying that we want ministers and politicians to control the media. The problem is that media and powerful figures behind it have too much influence in politics. That's the problem, and we need to sever that tie, at least to a certain extent, so that politicians are able to make decisions without being influenced by politicians. That's definitely one of the biggest problems that we have. The Leveson Inquiry, launched in 2011, investigated the practices and ethics of the British press following the phone hacking scandal involving the now defunct News of the World. The first part of the inquiry, led by Lord Justice Leveson, focused on the culture, practices and ethics of the press, and its recommendation led to creation of Ipso, the press watchdog. The second part was intended to examine the unlawful conduct with media organisations and the relationship between the press and the police, but has been on hold since 2018. The latest comments from the Commons for the Culture Secretary suggest that the continuation of the inquiry remains off the table under the current administration. Yeah, because the likes of Murdoch and other media mongols don't want this inquiry staying on the shelf. They don't ever want it brought forward. They want to keep it on the shelves. This is both something that, and this is the pressure that's coming from them onto Labour as well as the Conservatives. Under Jeremy Corbyn, Labour was committed to holding Leveson 2, which would have devolved further into the phone hacking at the Murdoch-owned News of the World. The Sun and Sunday Times backed Labour at this month's general election after the News UK received two private assurances that a Starmer-led government would not pursue Leveson 2 or introduce restrictions on press freedom. The Eye understands. Interesting. Now, I've got to bring this up because I have commented on this before. So, the Times did not. The Times did not officially back Labour. Now, I could be wrong about the Sunday Labour, but I know that the Times did not officially back Labour. The reason that they didn't was because they weren't given that assurances that they would not be bringing press or media reform. Now, the Eye here is saying something different here. Now, Phil Morehouse did a video response to this, and he never addressed this, which I think Phil from a different bias, for those who don't know. He's got quite a powerful following, and he has stated on numerous occasions that the Times, who didn't endorse Labour, this is his words, not mine, he said that they would only endorse him if he promised there would not be media reform. And Keir Starmer did not promise that. He could not promise that, and that's why they never gave his backing. But the eye here is saying that the Sunday Times backed him. So something is going to miss there. And I think that's a very important point I wanted to highlight to you guys. Now let's go with the assumption that that if this is true from the eye. If this is true, this is really bad. This is extremely bad. Because it means that once again the British public are being played for by fools and mockery, and we have no say once again. That our problems, our issues are not as important as as what the media mongrels and its owners and its puppet masters demand. We need more than ever to press this Labour government for media reform. It's not enough to just say about it. Langton Murdoch, the head of parent company News Corp, approved the endorsement after meeting with Sir Keir Starmer and his team. Relations had been cool with Sir Keir since he had sanctioned prosecutors of the newspaper group journalists as director of public prosecutions. The Sun leader comment backing Labour mentioned as a free press as one of the common sense values that the papers supported. Ms Nandy also made clear that Labour intends to move on from the criticism of public broadcasters seen under previous government, which saw MPs and ministers accuse the BBC of bias. We feel where we feel criticism of this government is unfair, we'll say so, but I want us to move away as a country from the ongoing running commentary from ministers about whether they consider the actions of the media to be appropriate or not, or trying to interfere in what is said or what is not said. All this nonsense about attacking institutions for being too woke, for lacking impartiality, she continued. In an article she wrote for Labour List in 2020 where she ran to be Labour leader, the Culture Secretary suggested she supported multinational parts of the corporation to involve direct ownership by licence fee payers. After this idea appealed to her, she responded, as we look again at the BBC, as the Charter comes up for renewal, as the renew for the last government, that the last government starting will continue. But with a slightly different emphasis under this government, these are conversations that I'm keen to have. How do we give people far more of a stake in the future of the national broadcaster? She insisted there would be no interference with the BBC licence fee model until the current charter runs out in 2027. But at that time, she would be really keen to explore all options with stakeholders in a view in mind to safeguard the future of the BBC. My issue isn't just the BBC. My issue is that the fact that they are going to maintain the status quo with regards to what's happening now, and that's really, really annoying to me, guys. It is extremely frustrating if this is to be true, and I say if because we just honestly don't know. And the thing is that the country is in such a state right now that other priorities are in the way. But those who are still heads in deep into politics know how important the Leveson Inquiry must be implemented, how important that media reform is for the benefit of the whole of the UK. Because as long as there is media that is with the intention of putting their interests before the interests of the British public, there will never be free and fair elections to an extent, because you will always have these people trying to put their interests at first and never ours. They will throw carrot sticks in front of us to say that, oh, we're going to give the public this and this and that. Carrot sticks to make it look like, yeah, that they do care about us. But the bigger picture is that they don't. That's the reality. And as long as the Leveson Inquiry is sitting on the shelf, the longer the media will always have control. There's a saying, you guys, that I've come to learn. Control the media, control the mind. So, what do you guys think? What do you guys make of the Leveson Inquiry Part 2? Won't go ahead, apparently, from the new Culture Secretary's suggestions. What do you make of the of what's been said in here? What do you make of Labour's position? What do you make of Murdoch and the media empire? What do you make on the BBC? Let me know your thoughts and more in the comment section down below. If you found this video interesting, please hit the like button. We greatly appreciate it. Share it across social media so others are notified of this video, and subscribe because it really does help support the channel. And if you want to go one step further, financially support me in the work that I do here, you can do so by becoming a YouTube member for as little as 99p, or join me on Rumble or Patreon for exclusive content on those platforms. So thank you all so much for watching. I hope to catch you all very, very soon.